Hopefully you've read the section in section 16.4 of your textbook that talks about transmutation. And this is the diagram from the textbook. This is figure 16.9, and I hope you go through this carefully and understand this diagram. This will help you get through this activity. Particularly, it'll help you get through the last question, because the last question is essentially a similar question to this one. So what's going on here is you start out with an atom of uranium-238. And what this diagram shows you is that the uranium-238 undergoes the emission of an alpha particle. That's what this green arrow stands for. And that uranium-238 becomes thorium-234. Well, how is that possible? Well, it emits, again, the alpha particle is emitted. Remember what an alpha particle is. It's the nucleus of a helium atom, which means that's 2 protons, 2 neutrons. So the alpha particle has an atomic mass of 4. And for mass to be conserved, if you start out with the uranium that has a mass, an atomic mass of 238, and then it ejects a particle that has a mass of 4, the remainder, what's left over, should have a mass of 234, which is just 238 minus 4. Now think about what also is happening when uranium undergoes that alpha decay. It loses 2 protons. So it starts out, uranium, and again, you can always check your periodic table for this, but uranium has a nucleus that has 92 protons. But it loses a particle that takes away two protons. So what you're left with is an atom that has 90 protons. Well, if it has 90 protons, it's no longer uranium. Remember that an element is defined by the number of protons in its nucleus. If you only have 90 protons, you're not uranium anymore. You are thorium. So therefore, the uranium-238, when it emits an alpha particle, becomes thorium-234. All the green arrows represent alpha decays. All the red arrows indicate beta decays. Okay, so this Module 2 skills test is entitled Transmutation of Elements. What this means is that elements can mutate. They can go from being one element to a different element as they undergo the process of some sort of radioactive decay. Now, one thing that I mentioned right off the top in this skills test is that it'll be very useful for you to have a periodic table handy. So I give you a link to a periodic table. It should open up in a separate tab so you can continue to do your skills test and refer to that periodic table. Now, the first few questions ask you to figure out how a particular element will change to another element. That's what the question marks represent in the process of some sort of radioactive decay. In this case, in question 1, it's the emission of an alpha particle. So that's what the He and a 4 and a 2 stand for. It's a helium, the nucleus of a helium atom. It's got an atomic mass of 4. It's got an atomic number of 2. So what you have to do is you fill in these blanks by putting in, again, this mystery element. You've got to figure out its necessary atomic mass. That's going to go up in your top left box. The atomic number of that element in the bottom left box, and then over in the right box, you're going to put the atomic symbol, okay, the abbreviation for that particular element, and that's where the periodic table is going to come in handy. And you do several questions like that. Then the last question is going to make you go through a chain. I described earlier the transmutation chain that's shown in figure 16.9, how you start out with uranium and you wind up with lead. You start with uranium-238, you wind up with lead-206. And in this case, you're starting out with uranium-235 and you wind up with lead-207. You've got to choose from these little drop-down boxes the type of emission that must occur to get you from the first step to the next step to the next step to the next step. So you're going to work your way along the chain, selecting whether there's an alpha particle emitted or whether there's a beta particle emitted in each of these transformation or each of these transmutations.